is my book fell apart, so I can't even sell it.
Oh, dang. You did send a picture of that your book was just falling
I was so pissed. I'm like, I can't even freaking sell it.
I'm glad I didn't buy a physical copy of this book. I was like, oh yeah, I'll buy a physical copy.
I didn't read it, so I think I won. Ultimately in the end.
Charles like, I didn't even read it. I'm just here to be the peanut gallery.
Yeah. He's just here for the show.
Right, exactly.
All right. So welcome everyone. My camera is going to be delayed the whole show apparently, so I'm sorry about that. But we are discussing SeveNeves by Neal Stephenson. Actually, first, Ryan, why don't you introduce the book since this was your pick? And then we're going to give it over to Nicole to have a rant.
This is a book that I read probably 5+ years ago. And it literally, like, I was just like, oh, hey, a new book by this guy. And I knew the author and I read it and I was actually really intrigued by it. Basically, the story of, a apocalypse that's coming in the near future and how humanity tries to adapt and survive it. Mostly focusing on the people that try to escape into outer space. And basically what happens in those years of them trying to escape. And then what the results of that is 5,000 years later.
All right, so we got the synopsis. So Nicole, go ahead and have at it. Give us your feelings.
Alrighty. So I said this before we went live, but I'll tell everybody who's watching. I DNF this book at 37%. So I tried really hard to make it to the halfway point, but I just could not. Like when I was listening to it this morning on the way to work, I was falling asleep driving. I'm like, I have to shut it off. I cannot like endanger my life, the lives of others. Like it's not worth it. This book is not worth it. So yeah. So I DNF'd this book when I was literally falling asleep with the sun directly in my face driving to work. I've read like some sci-fi romance, but I've also DNF'd Dune as well. So I feel like this gives me some sort of leverage of like, I just DNF like really like hard like sci-fi books because like Alicia said, knows me, if they're not banging, I don't really care. And the sex that we did get, I'm sorry, did this man climax as he was thinking about teaching calculus to his baby? I wanted to DNF at that point, but I'm like, no, it's only like 12% in. Like, I gotta give it more. And I'm like, did he really just say like, oh, and like, as I was thinking about teaching my baby calculus, I climaxed. I'm like, really? You chose that? Really?
You can definitely tell it's written by a man.
Oh God!
It's how excited we get about math sometimes,
I mean, if you're like a doctor scientist dude, I mean that might get you off. But
in facts, he was a doctor scientist dude.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where I think it's, it differentiates itself from like hard sci-fi in that it does have much more human characteristics. Like with hard sci-fi.
Wait, this is not hard sci-fi?
Oh, this is absolutely hard sci-fi.
I was gonna say, wait a second.
Alicia was so angry. She's like, this is not hard sci-fi.
It's just about facts. Like it's about like you start looking at other stuff. Like I just think of like Rendezvous with Rama and how much like that is the most tedious, boring book. Like it's a great premise, but it's just like, oh my gosh, how many times can you describe a cylinder in space?
Yeah, but that book's also under 200 pages.
200 pages in the middle of the book. I wanted to die.
That's a good point. That's a good counterpoint.
I felt like I was listening to it for forever, and I wasn't even
okay. I knew
through
Nicole
with
was
it.
probably not going to finish it when you were like, "Oh, I can just read in one day." Like, "Oh, like
Yeah.
trying to spend 10 hours." Okay, I was like,
That's
too much.
Nicole, I started this last month. I finished it yesterday. Like,
If I was not in danger of causing collisions on the road, I would have finished it because I was actually listening to it at 3 times speed and I was following along pretty well. mind you, I probably wouldn't have got it if I was like physically reading it or listening at like 1 time speed. That is not the point. I was hearing the words and they were being processed. The fact that Ryan was just like, oh, like this isn't hard sci-fi. I was like, don't make me feel stupid on the live, okay, Ryan? Like,
that was my biggest problem with the book. I felt dumb. This book made me feel stupid. I was like,
wow,
Ryan
is calling all of us dumb.
I didn't. Here's my thing. There was a lot of it that I for sure didn't understand, but I didn't necessarily feel dumb because I was like, it's not what I've spent my whole life like studying. So like, it's not my like field. It's not my profession.
Honestly,
so I was like, I don't understand it, but that's okay.
If I have to be a doctor, a literal doctor, to understand the stuff that I'm trying to read and enjoy, it's not enjoyable for me. Like, it's not. Like, why did you have to make this sound so difficult? And why is it so hard? And I have a degree. I'm telling you, like, I
got 2.
I'm not
and I still didn't understand it.
So did you miss the lesson on orbital dynamics that he gave you when he was describing?
I think I'm scarred for life on orbital dynamics.
I understood that they called one of the pieces of the moon kidney bean. I'm like, yeah, got that. Yeah, it's in there forever. Oh my god, kidney bean?
Like, this is so funny.
I don't know. It's one of those things that for me, like something like that, like I know enough to know, like, you know, to go as far as to be like, okay, I understand the concept. Do I care about the details? No. Like, for me, I read that stuff and I just kind of like, okay, save what's important, save what's not. Like,
yeah, just kind of glaze over it.
And I guess it does take some degree of familiarity with like how those things work and stuff. And like I said, I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. Like, there's a game called a video game called Kerbal Space Program. And it's literally just a video game about orbital dynamics. But it's wrapped in that, like, okay, hey, if you want to get to the moon, this is what you have to do, sort of thing. Like, so things like, you know, where they're talking about those orbital dynamics and their perigees and their, you know, and it all made, you know, relative sense to me in that I just need to know that it works. I don't need to know why it works or how it works, just that it works.
Oh, but Neal still tells you.
Well, yeah, I feel like
how and why it works.
with an extra 400 pages that aren't needed.
Excruciating detail.
There are so many times where they were going on and on about like, oh, and because of this thing, and then this might happen, and if that thing does happen, then this might happen. I'm like, you could just say, we did some math, and this might happen. Boom! I fixed it.
Three pages in 2 sentences.
Honestly, like, why couldn't you have been this author's editor? Like, I would have ripped out entire.
Oh, Nicole, you would have ripped out the whole book. You're like,
I would have been like, you don't
chapter
need
1
this.
and the end.
You don't need
That's all
this.
you get.
Rip it out.
Having a background in copy editing, this hurt me. Like, having a background in copy edits, this hurt my soul. Like,
correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like hard sci-fi is like some reasons why people don't like literary fiction. Whereas like literary fiction can be like all purpley, very stylistic, has really no point, but it's art. I feel like hard sci-fi is like, okay, I'm gonna be super exhaustive and describe every single thing for like 200 plus pages just to show how like intellectual I am. I feel like those are like 2 similarities between those 2. That's what I'm kind of getting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Where it's not so much about the story, it's more about like the craft and what it's doing in that genre, where it's like it's not really meant to be like, oh, this is so fun and entertaining. It's supposed to be like
prove to you how much I know in so many pages.
And culture.
Yeah.
I feel like the point of this book is, you know, it's near future, you know, within the next 50 years, you know, humanity is going to end. So in my mind, it feels like that he's really trying to like show that this is a possibility. Like, if something terrible like this should happen to the planet, there's a possibility we could survive, and this is how it could go. In that, like, I feel like it's more of, you know, using that rationale of like, yes, it's sci-fi, but it's not really implausible.
What I found really interesting about that was so there were questions and like hypotheticals that I was really intrigued by, and I was like, oh man, what would happen if all of a sudden the Earth was non-habitable and we had to live in space or we had to live underground? Like, how would that work? But I feel like all the things I wanted to know didn't get addressed. So it's like,
my biggest problem too.
yeah, so it was like, okay, the people who lived underground, how did that happen? Like, did they find like caves and underwater, not just underwater, but apparently underwater, like underground, like plant life, because you need oxygen still? And like, what did they eat? I think they mentioned that, but I was sort of like glazing over at that point. When they were in space, I was like, what about like art? I was like, people aren't just gonna live for the next 5,000 years without art. Like, what would be the point? Be like, oh, I have to, I guess. Like, no, nobody would want to. And what about like actual doctors or like people? At one point they were talking about like waste disposal, and I was like, what would be really handy to have on like your like space station, like a garbage disposal guy, somebody who worked in waste management, because they know how it works, because they have experience with that. And there's so many so many life experiences that like they just never mention. It's like only scientists. And I was like, yeah, I get that that's important, but you need other people too.
Right.
I don't know. I had more questions at the end than I did answers.
To address the what would you do, just stuck underground without art and you're bored and nothing to do. Can I cuss on this channel?
Oh yeah.
You're gonna fuck. And I feel like that wasn't addressed properly, except for in regards to finding calculus really erotic. And I will never get over it.
It actually was
like
addressed.
The one scene that will never leave Nicole.
You're
just like reading some of her books and you're like,
no, you wouldn't have liked how the underground society turned out as far as sex and how that went. It became a very
tell me about
patriarchal, oppressive, defend virginity. Yeah.
I do remember something about that, where they're talking about how they wanted the women to be pure, and I'm like, oh great. I'm sorry, unless you're a werewolf or a vampire, I don't want your alpha wholeness around me. Like, I don't want it. So unless you're one of those two things, you can get away with all that.
Things where I think in the book they explain that the underground society became very religious. Mm-hmm. But part of that was also population control, because they only had so much room to, for their society. So they were talking about how breeding was, for them, a very controlled thing, so that the society didn't get out of whack, so that they didn't grow beyond their ability to provide. So it was
pull and pray, man. Pull and pray. Religious.
But to me, what's interesting is I feel like the underground society thing is a much more plausible thing. Okay, sure, you may start out with, how many miles of caverns, but over time, how many more could you build? How much more could you do? And it's one of those things where it's to me, that seemed like a more realistic way to save more people. And it would have been, in the long term, more successful. I mean, obviously, humans were adapted to be above ground, but they clearly had some sort of ways to, replenish their oxygen to, why couldn't they have built something where they could, harvest oxygen that was just superheated from the surface and bring it down? It's just, we get it. The surface was too hot to live on. It was more about the science and more about okay, what happens if we do this? I feel like the stories of the underground and the sea would be much more human stories, not so much science based.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The Cloud Arc, or the orbital space station, is definitely going to be the more dangerous of them. I guess being undersea would be dangerous at the beginning too, but yeah, definitely just digging would be the quickest thing to do, because we're already on the ground. We don't have to launch things into space and everything.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So
I'm not going into space, so I'll go under.
Well, I feel like we didn't address question 1.
We want to go back to that? Yeah.
Yeah. What was your experience with reading hard sci-fi?
All right, Alicia, go ahead and go.
Yeah.
Oy. I guess Dune. That's pretty much it, really.
Did you DNF it too?
No, I did. I suffered through it. That's before I became comfortable with saying fuck it and DNFing shit.
Oh, got it.
I don't know. I guess the other book that we did would be space opera, but would that still fall under sci-fi? I don't know. I'm not a sci-fi person.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah,
you would actually get people arguing Dune being hard sci-fi. So hard sci-fi is like written for scientists. Like it's to entertain academics, with its accuracy. So it sometimes doesn't
sci-fi
focus.
romance and sci-fi.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it if y'all would stop calling me stupid. Thanks. That's great.
What?
No one's stupid.
Oh, they're like, Dune's not a hard sci-fi. Well, I DNF Dune because it was hard.
It made my brain hurt.
Dune's a very DNF book. I would agree.
I'm good.
Like Dune is so dry and clinical, and you know, so are parts of this book. Like I didn't feel like they were that dry and clinical. Like I said, that's where I refer back to Rama, where it's very dry and clinical, and talking about this or that. Like, yeah, this does do a lot to explain science, but in my mind, it still had that human aspect to a degree.
Right.
All right, Amber, go ahead. What's your experience with hard sci-fi?
So I'm not the best with defining genres specifically. So I've read quite a lot of sci-fi, but I don't think I've actually read that much hard sci-fi. I read Hyperion once upon a time. Y'all can let me know if that counts.
I think so.
I've read other stuff.
Yes. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Would you
I had to read it.
Jurassic Park is hard sci-fi?
I'd say that's close. Yeah, I would say Jurassic Park is close to hard
were
sci-fi.
non-existent in that book. It was a terrible book, and that movie is my favorite. So,
okay, thank you,
funny.
Amber. Jurassic
I
Park,
love-
the book,
I love
is
the movie.
fucking terrible.
It's
It
the
is so
worst.
bad.
It is awful. And then they made it like all the women in that book were just stupid and ditzy and over-sexualized, which I know is a problem in a lot of sci-fi, but still, it was. I was like, come on, guys, it's the 90s. Like, you got to be better by now. You got to be like a little bit better by now. Anyway, sorry, sidetrack.
Sorry for that rant.
Yeah, sorry, I have a lot of feelings. But yeah, so I've read that. I've read Hyperion. I don't know if The Martian counts. That one had a lot of science.
The Martian is hard sci-fi. Yeah.
It was also like very personable. So I read like An Unkindness of Ghosts. That seemed like I don't know if that would be hard sci-fi, but it was definitely more space opera-y. And I might have read other stuff, but I can't recall. I do like sci-fi, but I tend to prefer stuff that is more personable. Like I love Becky Chambers. I love Octavia Butler. Anything that I could like theoretically foresee happening in an alternate universe or a future or something like that, where also there are people that I can actually give a shit about. That's the kind of sci-fi I like to gravitate towards generally.
All right, Ryan, go ahead. Drinking.
What's the question?
What's your experience with hard sci-fi?
The one on the screen.
There's so much sci-fi out there. Like I said, and you know what? It's just funny because it is. To me, this doesn't feel like hard sci-fi. It feels like, hey, I'm explaining how this stuff works and why it's so important. Not necessarily like, oh my God, stop explaining it. But to me, that's my thing. Like, I understand it to a degree that I want to. Like, okay, I read through, him talking about burning stuff and going right directions and stuff. That's all interesting to me. I pay attention to what SpaceX is doing. And, it's one of those things where I always laugh about it. Like, I'm always, me personally, so concerned with us as a species, like getting on other planets and, just in case something happens here. But at the same time, I'm like, but should we? Do we deserve to exist? Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
Oh yeah, the deserving of existence.
And it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I love it all. Like I've read Hyperion. The whole Hyperion Cantos is actually one of my favorite series. Like great series there. And even some of like that's what, oh god, who's the author on that? Is that Dan Brown? No,
Dan Simmons.
Dan Simmons.
Wow.
Like some of his other stuff, like oh gosh, what was that one that was based on the Iliad, Aaron?
Oh yeah, Ilium and Olympus.
That one was too weird for me. I was like,
yeah, I read the first one. That one was weird.
I was just like, you know, there's certain things that I can totally get behind, and other ones where I'm just like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So he wrote a series based
recent popular sci-fi, like Martha Wells is super popular. I can't stand her. I read like a page. I was like, nope, not doing this.
Oh,
Unpopular.
Oh,
That's very unpopular.
that's a spicy take.
Yeah.
that is an unpopular
That is a
opinion.
spicy one.
I feel like I don't know who that is.
All right,
I feel
Ryan, don't
really
get me
out of
canceled on BookTube, okay?
I'm just an unpopular opinion.
That's Murderbot, right? The Murderbot Diary, Martha Wells. Yeah.
I don't think I know that author at all. I don't think I've even heard that name. I must not be.
It's novellas, right?
Really?
A collection
It's
of
novellas.
Yeah,
and
each
then
book
it
is
goes
like
to
3
full
hours
length.
on audio. They're great.
Alicia's like, they're amazing.
Well, for me, that's better. Like smaller chunks is easier for me to understand than a
Same.
book this size when it comes to sci-fi.
Oh, I feel like
That's
this
what
would
I
have been.
Side of that, like
Two
the
novellas.
Ancillary Justice series, which to me feels like it would be somewhat similar,
Mm-hmm.
I totally got down on. I tore through that series no problem.
What was the name of the series?
Ancillary Justice.
Okay, I've heard of. Okay.
It's a 3-book series, and I was fine until the end of the 3rd book. Then I was just like, oh, I hate this author.
Oh.
I feel like you shouldn't. Oh, here we go, Ryan. Yep, you're in trouble already.
No, and it begins.
No. Okay, so yeah, I read a lot that Amber that you were talking about in Unkindness of Ghosts. I read The Martian. I also read another one that I can see the cover like really great in my head. I can see it, but I cannot think of the title of it right now. But
What's on the cover?
huh?
What's on the cover? Maybe we can
And
figure
it's
it
just
out.
it's like red. It's not, I mean, it doesn't really have anything on it other than like it's just a red cover. And I'm trying to look through it because I think I read it last year, but that's like so many books for me to look through. But I'll keep looking for it and just like chime in when I do find it. But yeah, like Dune, I feel like Dune was really difficult. I remember watching like the really old movie, and then like this new movie was coming out, and I'm like, okay, I kind of want to give it a try before the new movie comes out. Okay, book was boring. Also, movie was incredibly boring. I watched it for Zendaya, and she was only in it for 7 minutes, so that was really upsetting. And also,
Oh my goodness.
I only watched it for Jason Momoa. Okay, I'm probably worse.
Everyone
than
was
Jason
angry
Momoa,
that
okay?
Zendaya was not in the movie longer. It's freaking Zendaya.
And you know what? They pumped up her role from that story. She was a glorified womb in that story or that character.
Going off of the trailer, you would think she was in every single scene, and she's in the last
and she's
5 minutes.
And yeah, her voiceover too. I'm like, okay, sure, I guess.
Yep.
Okay, like, gosh. So yeah, that was really upsetting. And then also, of course, I read Ice Planet Barbarians. Like, all the guys were super hard in that. I mean,
This is true. This does count as hard sci-fi. Yes. we'll give you that one, Nicole.
that's what I thought. I read some hard sci-fi. Okay. Like,
Oh my god. Oh, thank you, Nicole. I needed that. Oh my god. Oh
but yeah, that's my area of expertise. Charles,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Go ahead, follow that.
I can't top that, but I'm the only one who didn't read the book.
Oh yeah.
I saw 30 hours on audio, and I was like,
And
my
you-
reading schedule can't handle a 30-hour audiobook, so I will let everyone else vicariously read it. And I saw Nicole was reading it, and I was like, let's see how long how far she gets in this book.
I thought you
And
were
I was
gonna
right,
not
but
even come to the live show. You were gonna be like the day of, be like, fuck it, not going. I'm like not gonna show up.
Oh, I would still show up. Definitely, I wouldn't like just bow out.
I
But
was waiting for it.
I would say for like hard sci-fi, I think I haven't read a ton. I think I was more like literary fiction, YA, middle grade. I think it stemmed from I was so turned off by Lord of the Rings. Like when it was like I was little, like me being like a little social justice person. I was like, I said to all my family, I was like, I don't want to watch Lord of the Rings because there aren't a lot of Black or POC characters in the show, and so like that just kind of like veered me off, and I gravitated on to Harry Potter because of like Dean in that series, and that kind of led me into other books, Rick Riordan and everything like that. So that's where I kind of stayed, and I've kind of stayed away from a lot of hard, like even high fantasy.
Yeah,
that's written by like predominantly white authors. I tend to stay away from, as well as hard sci-fi, because I'm like, I'm probably not going to see a ton of POC characters in this. But now it's just evolved to like it's not something that I'm interested in gravitating towards, because I feel like you're just gonna get info dumped, or you're gonna have 500 pages of like info. And I heard the Lord of the Rings, like J.R.R. Tolkien, like describes a lot of things in like really like in a very detailed manner, like a tree or something. So I was like, oh, okay.
No, not just the tree, the bark of the tree, the pattern on the leaves of the tree.
Right. The way the sun is shining
I
down.
gateway book into hard sci-fi. I just haven't found, because I read The Martian, and that didn't feel like hard
yeah,
sci-fi, because it was like funny, it was humorous,
funny.
It was like it had like thriller aspects to it. So I think I need it in combination with other things for me to get into the genre. Yeah. So when I saw this book, I was like 30 hours. I was like, okay, I respectfully sit this one out.
Disrespectfully decline. But but yeah, well, with The Martian, like I listened to that audiobook as well, and I felt like the narrator was just so good at delivering those like dry, witty one-liners that were just like so hilarious. Yeah, I was laughing like the entire time of that book. And I did remember that book that I read that I couldn't remember the title, but I remember the author, and that's how I found it. But it was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch.
Okay. I was wondering if it was that one.
I think that's hard. Is that hard sci-fi, or is that a thriller?
What's the premise of that one? Is that the people that relive the same lives over and over?
Yeah.
Well, no, it's the one where there's like different versions of
there's different versions of yourself, like multiverse, like the different choices that you make. Like, so we're following this one person and the choices that they're making, but like it all comes together at the end where it's just like every single choice that he made made a different version of himself, or it was kind of like that kind of split reality kind of thing. And it's about traveling in those realities. And it was like that kind of got hard to follow, especially like towards the end where, spoiler alert, they all kind of converge at the end and they all kind of meet. But again, the narrator was really good. It was really interesting. And honestly, it was almost kind of like an unreliable narrator. It's just like, am I following the correct this person, or is it like one of the choices that he made? And like, but it was really interesting. I really enjoyed that one. And if you don't say it's hard sci-fi, you will hurt my feelings. So
I haven't read that one.
I feel like it is. Like Blake Crouch has he's like hard sci-fi / thriller. They have like a thriller type edge to it. Okay. You know what I mean? Like it's a page turner. Like you're like, oh my goodness, what's happening next?
Right.
Because he has he has a memory book.
Oh, the only other book that I know from
Recursion.
Him was Wayward Pines. That's the only thing I really know.
It's big.
It was like
you read Wayward Pines.
I watched.
Did you finish the whole trilogy?
No, I watched the show, and that's how I kind of knew like who he was. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. My TBR is 5,000 page books. I mean, but the books are good. Okay, well,
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The books are really good. That one's more a post-apocalyptic. Yeah, but it gets especially the third book has a love triangle. So
yay!
Eat your heart out on that one, Nicole.
Okay, do they become a throuple, or does the person choose a person?
Well, that's spoiling it.
Okay, well, I kind of want to know.
It doesn't.
Or does one of them figure it out and just, choose themselves first and remove
The thing about
themselves from the
this,
situation?
it's interesting because the two of the guys were coworkers before Wayward Pines, and then there's like time and differences.
So you're telling me they don't all get together? It's not a throuple at the end.
No, it's more like they want he
Irritating.
wants his family back, so he's trying to kill the other dude to get his family back. Yeah, it's
Oh God.
Okay, whenever there are love triangles, I just want them all to be together at the end. So
see, I blame romance for that because now we're exposed to like reverse harems and all that stuff. I'm like, now I can't look at a love triangle and think clearly. I'm like, okay, she has to choose one.
no,
How
why
about no?
choose?
Let's just
Why
let
choose?
everyone be happy.
I just don't like the term reverse. Like I don't like the term
She-
heroin. Period. Just
She has to choose.
let it
No, she
be a
doesn't.
thing and not use that word. Like it's just.
Yeah.
I am curious. What are some good hard sci-fi books for me to check out
I
that are
haven't
like
actually
good
read
entryways? Like, don't
that
recommend me
many of
Dune.
them.
I will watch the movie
Don't.
for that. I already watched the movie.
It's hard to recommend a hard sci-fi to someone that wants to try them because it's like, where would you begin even?
Yeah,
I would almost send you to another book by Neal Stephenson and make you read Snow Crash or The Diamond
Ew.
Age.
I don't know if I trust him.
Maybe
I
an
know, like-
Anthem. So my biggest complaint about this one actually was Stevenson usually does better with characters. You usually have some characters that stick with you and that are pretty memorable. But in this one, it was like they were just there to do their jobs,
suck.
like literally.
Copy paste. Boom, boom, boom.
Mhm.
I couldn't tell you a single character's name in this book.
I only know
Could not tell you.
because I only know the one because he made the guy from Philadelphia sound like an asshole. That's the only reason I remember that.
Jean Probst.
I'm like, really? Why does the only guy from the Philadelphia, Jersey area have to be an asshole?
Honestly, that
Why?
name
Stereotyping.
sounds remotely familiar. Like I have never heard that name in my life.
My mom, I was listening to it in the car on the way back home for a wedding, and my mom goes, why does he make the guy from Jersey sound like a douchebag? I'm like, I don't know. and I'm like 9 hours into it, and my mom's like, I don't get it. I'm like, Mom, I've been listening to it from the beginning. I don't even fucking get
And
it.
I don't get it.
I think Jersey Shore was pretty popular when this book was released, so it was riding its peak.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was like, why?
Wait, I'm like reading the first chapter of Snow Crash right now. Why is his writing style so matter of frank? It's just like I did.
It is one of his first.
Sorry,
books.
I'm being very critical
So,
right now. I'm like,
yeah.
For
I haven't
someone who didn't even read
reread
the
that one
book.
in a while.
no, I'm like, are all his books like 500 plus pages? Like, does he have give me like a novella, something to ease me in,
novella,
and to pad my Goodreads goal.
Read Me. It's just called Read Me by Neal Stevens. That's a short one, I think.
Oh, I thought you said breed
It's literally
me, and I'm
called
like,
Read
wait,
Me.
what?
Yeah.
What are we breeding?
Aaron, remove Nicole.
I took a
from
drink
the
of the wrong shit.
Let's
And
put
then
her on mute.
And then you're like, oh, read me. I was like, that's less.
We just got an NC-17 rating just right now.
Yeah. I heard Nicole's pen hit the floor. Just now.
Never mind.
Would
Yes.
the Martian Chronicles count as a hard sci-fi?
I wouldn't count it
kinda
as
like
one
short
because it's
stories.
too fantastical. Like,
Okay, that's what I.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking that, but I really like that one too.
Would you?
I feel like hard sci-fi is like the same genre problem that romance does. Like we have like urban. What's the difference between urban and paranormal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or fantasy romance. I feel like
What
it's
about
like
A.K.
a
Jemison?
similar
Because she
thing.
kind of straddles fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I read the Broken Earth trilogy, but I'm not sure if that's sci-fi
think-
or fantasy.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Well, it says
Right.
that like
And, there
magic
can be
is
blends.
science
Yeah.
in that world, so I'm like,
It's both.
Well,
kind
it's
of.
so true. Like, as someone to explain the difference between urban fantasy and paranormal, Because they're basically the same. They're basically almost like the same. Like they have paranormal creatures in both, but the world
it's a Venn diagram.
More
right.
It's like That's what
like I figure it's more of like I feel like paranormal like romance, like like they're your like werewolves, vampires, and like the setting is contemporary. So like Immortals After Dark series, like it's in the quote unquote real world, but there's these paranormal creatures and aspects to it, as opposed to like real, like I wouldn't say real, but like hard like epic fantasy romance where it's just like the entire world is different, made up, things like that. It's like it has to do with like a contemporary setting or a completely made up setting.
And would the Dresden Files fall under that because it's
romance?
Isn't Dresden urban fantasy?
Well, because it's supposed to be like fantastical Chicago, so there's
I would
because isn't there like a low and high fantasy too? Like there's
that's
like
high
levels
fantasy,
of high there's like low fantasy, but low fantasy is not technically urban I don't know.
Well, I think personally that Game of Thrones is very low fantasy.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Like, I love Game of Thrones, but I don't think it's very it's not very fantasy heavy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
it's Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Is that horror sci-fi?
That's
borderline, yeah. So
okay, I watched really a TV show for that. So
really, what defines it is it real world science that's being used to explain what's happening? That's really the definition. There's nothing in there that works just because the author says it works.
Yeah, like Foundation is like pushing the limits right there. It's using those probabilities and taking it just like, oh, we can statistically say that this is going to happen.
Just like,
but they're saying it about the entire universe type of thing. So it's like, yes and no.
Okay.
It's all right.
All right.
Aaron, I demand a hard sci-fi recommendation video or guide from you.
See, I'm not even that well read in the hard sci-fi. I'm more of a pulp fan.
Hey, just stop reading your Harlequin category romances and you'll have plenty of time.
Okay, Charles, how about just like no more happiness for anybody? Like,
I read 2 Harlequins after I finished this because
Nicole, I was talking about for Aaron, not for me.
I watch his content. Are you saying no happiness for me either? Rude. Who invited him?
Seriously, my channel would have like 3 videos a year if I didn't read Harlequin.
Wow, Charles.
Actually, when has Aaron posted a video last? Like, oh wait, that was
it was a while ago. It was Reese Ryan.
Oh
yeah.
I found both of the first 2 books in that series the other day.
Oh, nice.
I got really excited.
Yeah, no, it's a good series. It's actually a Harlequin series I'd recommend that you actually read in order.
Oh,
yeah,
okay, cool.
I just can't figure out which one is the first one. I'm confused.
Homecoming Heartbreaker.
Okay, that's the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, because I got all 3 of them. I just wanted to make sure I read the first one in order.
Homecoming Heartbreaker.
All right, so I've got a few notes here. I was trying to rethink like what happened and just to hopefully spur some conversation here. So our book opens up, the moon explodes. The slow ramifications of what that means is that the surface of the world is going to be uninhabited for 5,000 years because it'll be too hot to live. And we get an introduction to Doob, Dinah, and Ivy. So
I don't remember any of these people. No, I remember Doob.
Yeah, okay, Doob was like a sort of Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah. Okay.
Narration for make the guy do the narration. Like I don't understand the dual narration for there not to have the guy until the 3rd section.
Well, wasn't that the 5,000 years in the future thing?
Yeah, but listening to her talk like Doob was pissing me off.
Yeah, her voice for Doob was weird.
Like guys don't talk like that.
And that was the only voice she did different, other than a little bit of an English accent for the one guy.
Yeah,
Reese?
I remember that.
Reese, yeah.
I felt like she was just reading a textbook to me, so that was also probably why
And she's an
I was
author.
sleepy. She's an author?
Yeah, she did that series about female astronauts. She did
What?
She did a
I
series
missed that
about
part.
female astronauts, like an alternate universe where female, like only women can be astronauts. What the hell is it called?
What is this person's name?
Robin Wall.
Oh, a different series. I thought you said in this book. I was like, well, I missed that part.
I
I
missed
know which book you're talking about.
There was actually
Robin
another
Wall.
chapter, Amber.
I don't know how it's spelled.
Counting the Stars? Is that what it's called?
That's one of them. Yep.
Watching the Stars.
There's like 4 or 5 in
well,
the series now.
I
am-
know it's like a group of women, like blue cover. They're like
Yeah.
power pose.
I like
She's
the
author of
idea.
the woman who did the audio is the author of those books.
Okay, I like the idea of lady astronauts. I don't like the idea that she wrote it.
Are we really judging this person by her voice?
Yes, I am. Hopefully, she doesn't narrate her own audiobooks because yikes.
She does. That's why I hit
Oh,
no.
okay.
No,
Well,
no.
I'm never reading it. So.
It's one way to increase your margins, right?
Yeah, great. Awesome.
But it should have been like a dual narration where like I think the guy narrator was fine. Like
I
it
didn't
should
make
have
it that
just
far.
been a dual
I would
narration.
just done a full cast at that point.
Ooh,
Why
that
not?
would've been
Why not
enjoyable.
make it an experience? Do full cast.
With the
Cast
sound,
everyone,
with the
charge
sound
$1
effects
bajillion
and whatnot.
for the audiobook.
Yeah, make it like a movie playing in
people
my
will buy
ears.
it.
Yeah, that would have been
Oh,
nice.
yeah.
I didn't buy it. I listened to it on Scribd.
So did I.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Although I
Yeah,
did own
I'm
a
glad I
physical
don't
copy
know.
of this at one point.
Wait, so you couldn't
Mhm.
speed it up to 3 times speed? So you had to
On
listen to it at
Scribd?
2 times speed?
Yeah, on Scribd, no, you can't. You have to like open the desktop. Unless you have an Android, then you can
Yeah.
listen to it on 3 times speed.
This is why I can't do Scribd or any play. I need my
Because-
3.5.
Well,
I can't listen
Scribd
to stuff
hates
that fast.
iPhone users,
Like, at
so
all. My comfort zone is 1.2 speed. Like depending on the book, I can do 1.5 or 1.6 if it's really slow. But I've almost never even get up to 2-point speed, like let alone 3. Oh,
It must be
I'm gonna
1.5.
mute
I
myself
get
and I'm just
that.
gonna see what 1.2 speed is like. Hold on one second.
It's like,
I had to slow it
I
down.
would say
for
because
this
like
book
I'm like a
really bad.
skim reader.
Nicole's
don't
about to be
read for
feel real sorry
details.
for me. She's about to feel
No,
real
that's normal. I heard like a lot of people do 1.25 to
1.25 is
1.5.
considered the like
Like normal.
natural speaking tone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure, but it made me fall asleep so
That.
much faster. 1.2, Amber. 1.2.
I
Yeah,
just
I
wrote
had
down
to
the
do,
one
I
that wasn't making sense.
Yeah,
I
would
get
do
that.
that.
But like
if
Jen's books, like if
that-
you go 2.5, you're like, I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have to face the option of, okay, do I rewind it and listen to it again slower so that I understand
Never.
it? Or do I just accept that I don't understand what just happened at all? And
Just
I
accept
mean,
it.
listen,
Option number 2.
didn't understand some things, but I tried. And I understood,
Yeah.
like, I understand the grand strokes of what happened. I did end up playing a lot of Civilization while listening. That was a great recommendation, Aaron.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. I do that a lot,
Yeah.
actually, but I just somehow completely forgot about it. And then you said something. I was like, oh, that's the thing that I do. So I played a lot of Civ and listened to this book, and it made it tolerable. I also
Yes.
did some crafting while listening to this book, and then I wasn't as motivated to be creative. So
I don't know why.
it was a bit rough. There was a lot of stuff.
The book just like slowly sucked the life out of
Yeah.
you at 1.25.
Yeah.
Gave my brain.
Yeah.
I felt the life
Kinda,
being drained from me, like not in a good way either. Like I just felt like a vampire was just, but not in a fun way.
I mean, like you could have died while listening to this book.
I
Like,
literally almost
I was like, this
died.
book is an endangerment to your driving.
Exactly. That's why I had to stop it. I was like, there's no way. People's lives are not worth the ending of this book.
So if you're ever in a thriller and someone plays an audiobook while you're driving, you know someone's after you.
Out to get you.
Just like the telltale sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yikes.
Yeah. No, I
But
honestly
it's weird,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was about to say like I'm like a weird reader in that like I don't care about the details of what I'm reading. I want the big idea of like what happened to this character, did this character die? Okay, what okay, I know the general gist. So that's why 3.5 works for me because I'm like I don't care what they look like. I don't care where they went. I don't care if they had this conversation. Do I know what happened by the end of this book? That's my rule. Like, because sometimes I finish books, I'm like, I have literally no idea what happened in the last 10%.
And I feel
And I
like
will
that's
never
what
go
this
back to
book
find out.
was.
Yeah, but that drives me nuts because then I feel like I
Really?
can't say that I've read it.
I feel like I wasted time if I can't tell you what happened.
Yeah.
I just
Like-
give it 1 star. I'm like, bye.
Just
My
like
thing-
you lose no sleep over it. You're like, and bye.
I was
Unmemorable.
like, and the next book.
1 star.
My thing is he focused so much on the cloud art stuff.
Yeah.
Like that was 600 pages of the book, and then we get to like the on Earth stuff, and that was like do 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 do, and then that last sentence, and I was like, wait, the book's over? All that shit for that?
Yeah.
I was like,
for that?
610 pages of stuff that doesn't matter, and then 200 pages of the stuff I was actually interested in. Like I wanted to find out about the water people.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the water people too. That seemed like a much more interesting story than the cloud arc.
Here's my thing about that. It said that they found underwater caves, and I was like, okay, but were the caves like? Did they have oxygen? Like, how did they still
Were
live
they
there?
filled with water?
Yeah. I'm
Because you
like,
still can't breathe water.
I'm like, okay, that was just okay for a guy who likes to over-explain a lot of really boring
You're not
shit.
explaining this.
I really could have elaborated on this one, like just a little bit. Like, just give us that extra like 5 pages to explain
It was like
how the hell these people
Neal-
survived underwater.
Really, as he was writing, Neal was just like, oh shit, I'm almost at my word count goal. And then like, I have to wrap this up.
He doesn't have a word count limit.
I know.
Like,
Like,
does
oh,
he have an
God.
editor? Is my question. Like, who gets paid to edit that shit? Like,
Well,
Well,
he
they're overpaid.
is like, yeah, he can do what he wants at this point because
basically
he's-
like Sarah
he's
J.
that
That's
Maas.
number
famous.
1, right?
Okay.
New York Times bestseller, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
first of all, I've never even heard of this person
Me
before.
either until you guys said
I have his book Fall. It's like the black cover with like the white bird.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
You know,
I haven't
I
read
thought it
that
was a
one.
thriller. I never read it, but I thought it was a thriller. I was like, oh, this looks good.
I just
That
think
was when I
someone
was on my
thinks-
like I must read Kirkus-starred reviewed books only kick.
Like, yeah,
Don't ask
someone
me
just
how I
thinks
got on that
a-
kick.
Someone just thinks
Don't
a
ask
little
me.
too highly of himself. That's all I have to say. Like
what does he do for a living? Because like
this.
he's like
I think
way
he was-
too into certain stuff.
I think he was trained in
Infinity.
computer programming. Actually, is his was his trade before he was an author. But
Does he know Russian?
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah, his books. You can tell that he's like picked up some new fancy and he does a whole bunch of research on it, writes a book about it that's super accurate.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of his when he was into cryptography, he wrote Cryptonomicon, and so that was this dual timeline thriller about coded messages from World War II and like family members in the present day, like decoding this big message and everything. Yeah, well, here's the thing. I didn't know generally what was happening in that book until around the 800 pages, so somewhere in there. And this was a 1,300 page book, I think.
No.
Oh no. No. No.
You know how many romance
I'm a
books
firm
that is?
believer. Just because you can write a long book does not mean you need to write a long book.
Dude,
I'm like, do not waste
Cryptonomicon,
the reader's time.
that was one where I was just like, I tried so hard to get into it, and I was just like, I can't do this.
Like
can't.
his premises
Even
sound amazing. Like the
That's
premise
how-
of this book was interesting.
Mhm.
He's really good at a blurb. He's
Yeah.
super good at a blurb. And if the
It's an
brevity of
illusion.
the blurb is like really good, how can you cannot put that brevity in your actual work? Like that's what I would like to know.
Because he
I
may not
second
actually write his own blurb.
Yeah, others don't write
It
the
may be the
blurb.
publisher.
That's true. Whoever writes your blurbs should just ghostwrite for you.
Here's my thing. I really would have liked this story a lot more, I think, if like preparing the Cloud arc had been a book and then everybody is on Earth again was the next book, and then either a third book or some kind of novella in between explained the pingers situation. Like I really would have enjoyed a little bit more fleshed out, like post 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Because I found that really interesting, but also by that point, I was also kind of burned out, and I was just like, when is this gonna be over?
You to read it because it's so long. It took me 20 days to read this. Like I've never spent this long on a book in my life. I don't think.
Really?
Yeah.
I
started this on the 1st of the month and I finished it yesterday.
I can't believe you lasted that long. Like
I wanted to cry, okay?
That is some like willpower. That's actually amazing. Like if you could bottle that and sell it, you would be a millionaire.
I guess it's the old school, like you said you were going to do something, you got to finish it.
At what expense though? At what expense though?
I feel you on that though, because like I can't. I it's so hard for me to DNF a book now because there's been so many cases where books I would have DNF ended up being my favorite reads.
I've gotten better by the end
so
of the
like, if I start a book, I'm like, it's ride or die. I will finish you. I will rant, review. There's only like one book recently then.
How do you think about DNFing a book at the beginning and then ends up being your favorite book at the end? Like that doesn't.
What book is it? Is the question.
Sometimes when it
because I don't pay attention for
right?
the first 50%, and then I'm like, oh wait, this is actually really good. Can I pay attention?
Sometimes it can tie together really well.
How many people DNF Pride and Prejudice? All right.
Hey, there's like this book called There.
It's
the ending that makes the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
What was that, Charles?
There's like a book called There by Tommy Orange. It's about like a group of Native Americans going to they have a celebration at the end. And you read the powwow, yeah. You read the whole book and you don't know how all of it connects until you get to like the 80% mark, and then the book is just phenomenal.
But
once
it's
you
also
see all
only
the different
350
stories.
pages.
But like you agree with me, Alicia, like you don't really quite know where it's going. And then like you get to the 80% mark and then you're like, oh wait, that's why the author spent all this time setting up these different storylines.
But he gives you a payoff. In this, I don't
it's a really good payoff.
Yeah, it has to pay off.
Good point. Yeah, there wasn't much payoff for
like
this.
It was just a throwaway line, and they go, "This is the end of Seven Eves," and I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, I was in the middle of doing dishes. I'm like, "That's how this freaking thing ends after 800 pages."
Well, and at that point, you're just expecting that you're going to be stuck listening to it for the rest of your life. So,
like, I will literally be listening to this book until like.
Like, didn't you know there's like a part 2, 3, and 4 that you just haven't found yet?
Ew.
Honestly, I wish. I would almost make it better. Like, I feel like he almost did himself a disservice by writing the post 5,000 year section. Like you know, if you can't make it hit hard, like, because we don't have time to, like, we barely made emotional connections in the first part of the book, and then like there's like no chance in the second. Like, I remember Kath too, but I think that was the only character, like the main character was first.
That's it.
Okay, Einstein, yeah.
I like Einstein and the
Doc and
girl.
Yeah.
And Kath too. I really didn't.
Oh yeah, what was her name? Tax law something.
Tax law something.
I did not make it that far.
Yeah, weird names.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weird amalgamations of names. They're like, okay.
Well, everybody has like 20 of them. That's fine.
Well, it was interesting to me, like, where he did stretch his science a little bit. Like, part of it was that oh, they had, encoded all the DNA into basically, recorded all the DNA for all the creatures into computer drives, so they could just, with the right chemicals, cook up whoever they wanted. And it was like, yeah, that's pushing it a little far there, buddy. And just some of those things where he took a couple things and he's like, let's just stretch this out and make it but it does serve interesting, and where he connected it to real scientific things, like about those black-footed ferrets and how they created a society out of 8 people. What was it? I think in the book they said there was 3 billion people living on the ring. So they created a society of 3 billion people out of 8 distinct genetic sets. Like, that's pretty impressive. And just saying that, yeah, we're close, but we could, like, this is what it could turn into if something like that should happen.
Yeah.
I didn't like the genetic part of it. Like, we're gonna tinker, and if one has bipolar, we're gonna pull it out. And I was like,
well, but that was the whole thing with that conversation where it was like they touched on the ethics of it, where they were like, well, does it make sense to get rid of bipolar? Because there's situations where someone that's bipolar might be a benefit. And where they were saying it was kind of up to them to select their own genetic destinies.
You know who I feel does like choices really well and really, really feel the weight of it very well? Octavia Butler. She presents you with like 2 impossible situations, and she makes you feel the full weight of either choice, or in some cases multiple choices. And like her topics of consent and choice and autonomy and everything are like just so well done. And this really did not hit for me in the same way.
And she also does it in 330 pages.
Yeah.
She's like in a class of her own when it comes to writers.
Absolutely.
Like, she's in a class of her own.
Yeah, that's true. But unfortunately, I will compare everybody to her now. So
I know. It's like if an author can tell like a really amazing story in like 100 pages or less, and then you have someone who tells a 600-page story and does not fully execute that story well, I'm like, I have to give it up. I have to give it up to the other author.
Like if it's great the whole time and it's that long, then that's fine. But if the whole time I'm just like, all right, I really need to go do literally anything else, like
like
literally anything else.
There's some paranormal series that I wouldn't care how long the fucking book was. Like, I'm so into that series. Like, write me 5 tomes, please.
Like
1,000-page next book. I'm like, let's go.
Oh my god, could you imagine? We have to get Nix's book, right?
What?
What's that?
I feel like the day we get Nix's book will be like the end of the series, though.
Oh, I'm only on like book 7, so I don't even know.
I've only read the first one. I know, seriously.
But Charles, I think you're right, and I think it has to be like literally 1,000 pages, because there's just so much of Nix. Okay, sorry.
It feels like it'll be like she recounts
like
the other books, like in the other stories or something like that.
Yes.
Who would be her partner though? Like what's the other guy on the other side? That head guy.
I know who you're talking about, but do I remember his name? No.
I don't remember his name, but I feel like those two are going to be endgame. Because I feel like that's the only person that's been introduced that could match Nix.
Yeah.
But that was a side tangent.
But
I get what you're saying, Aaron.
Right.
Like, have you guys read City of Brass by S.H. Chakraborty?
No.
Like, those books are thick, but like the way she builds the world is just amazing. Even if you don't exactly know what's going on, you're still with the characters. It follows 3 characters. It's like very high fantasy. Because I think it's like genie mythology and all of that stuff. It's like a whole different society with like it's almost like an allegory for like race relations a little bit, or class differences a little bit. But I was like, there's a way you can write a long book and make it really good.
Yeah.
Well, going back to a point, Amber, you made this point. I hate gendering things, but something I have very much noticed in the difference between sci-fi authors in being, whether they be male or female. It is males write big idea stories with very flimsy characters, and women tend to write very small ideas, small, difficult ideas, but with very complex characters in them.
Yeah. Well,
and put in very tough situations. Yeah.
And I feel like there's exceptions to each of those rules, but
Yes,
like
absolutely.
it is I feel a generally true broad categorization. And like I feel like with like lost my train of thought. With like women writing sci-fi, it's usually like what kind of real emotions can we encounter, and then with like men writing sci-fi, it's like what kind of real situations is that how I phrased it just now? Did I say what kind of real emotions versus situations? I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
I get what you're saying though.
It makes sense.
I'm just gonna drink from my giant mug of tea and pretend like it makes perfect sense.
It's much more about the physical than the emotional. Is that a good way to put it?
The what happens versus how you feel about what happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was definitely older than 2015, though, the way the characters were written. Like, I would have thought, like, this was back in, like,
this was a while ago. This was written.
Yeah. I had to look it up because I thought
a while ago.
Thing.
I think it was post 2000. But...
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't really look, but
it must be the reprint that was printed in 2015 because I tried to find the actual date.
No, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah,
because it was before you had moved, Aaron, and I remember I just randomly like found it, and I was like, "Oh, hey, this just came out." When I read it the first time.
Okay. All right. Well, I had some other stuff, but we've already gone for an hour now. Anyone have any final thoughts or rants or praises they want to heap upon SeveNeves by Neal Stephenson?
I think that many people would have a much fuller, richer life if they did not read this book.
I agree. And I feel like I will never think of calculus again without thinking of this book.
Or I can think that all the time.
Yeah, every time you have an orgasm now, calculus.
Oh my god. I mean, I hope not. I hope not. That would like ruin things.
So just like work your way into
one of those things where
your book that you're working on, Nicole.
Oh my god.
Subconsciously write that scene into
subconsciously
your
just write calculus in the next sex scene that I write. That would be hilarious. And I'll just be like, it's because of this book. Thank you.
The only takeaway.
The only takeaway. It's really the only thing that mattered, I feel like, in this book. And also, Kidney Bean was my favorite moon piece. Okay, go.
All right. Any other final thoughts?
Kidney Bean? Or am I wrong?
Yes, I think there was a 1 and 2. They had, as they all started splitting.
Collided into each other. Yeah. Kidney Bean #1.
Then it was KB1 and KB2. And at first I was like, wait, what are these letters coming from? And I was like, oh, right, it was from the actual name.
Yeah.
Because everything has to have 20 names.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else?
I'm actually curious what Ryan thought about reading it a second time.
Going back and reading it a second time, I mean, I can definitely see, like, I don't know, even like Charles brought up where you're looking at like female and male authors, like you're saying, Amber. Definitely, you're seeing. I find it really interesting in that it's trying to get so much done in such a little bit of time. It's, explaining everything that happened to cause what happened later in the book. Like, and how you were saying how it's like, oh man, there's so many opportunities here to get so many different places with these different cultures and stuff. And like, this really could be turned into like a trilogy or something or to that nature if they wanted to do that. And it might be better for it. but it's definitely a lot of that. And for me, like, I view it as more of a, like, the things that happen, like all the good intentions of the world, and here comes JBF and totally fucks it up. Like,
Yeah.
where the ugly head of politics basically ruins society is the gist of it. In that, they've got these great plans and look at how terrible they become.
Mhm.
And or even when they talked about the politics earlier on of seeing Sean Probst showing up on the space station, where it was just it had the politicians had viewed Ivy as a not capable leader because she let him onto the station,
Mm.
where it was essentially that's what saved the human race.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So just that kind of stuff to me was interesting, in that, like, where of all the best intentions, but then the president shows up on the space station and she can't help but try to pull power wherever she can because that's what she's used to.
Yeah. I did find that interesting.
Mhm.
I didn't like it, but I found it interesting.
Yeah, that it was rough, definitely seeing the politics creep back in. Like, you have this truly technocratic society where it's like, okay, we just need to make sure everyone lives. Like, that's our number one concern. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, aren't you worried that that person over there might be getting a little bit more than you are? and then it just spirals. Yeah.
Yep. Alonzo.
Kitty. Cat
Well,
cameo.
and I don't recall, but did they even talk about what happened to the people that were supposed to be going to Mars?
They all died. They all died except for Iona.
The guy that goes under the guy that goes under the submarine, right? Am I thinking the wrong part?
No. Like, so the whole point of the schism is that the president or former president says, "Hey, we need to go to Mars," and all these people are like, "Hey, we're going to go to Mars," and they talk about, like, okay, the cloud arc's going to raise, and then some people are going to go to Mars, and then everyone else is going to follow. But they never really explained, like, did the people that were going to go, or did they stay with the cloud?
No, so they rose up to the higher orbit first, but then they like got stuck there. They were gonna go to Mars from there, but then they starved to death, like, and then went into cannibalism.
And then they had all those issues, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was pretty poetic justice when the president had that bolt stuck through her tongue.
Right.
I was like, ouch.
Ouchie.
I hate that she was one of the seven Eves. Like, that was
right.
Like, oh god,
And I hate
no.
how they kept bringing up because the one had menopause that she couldn't do shit. And I was just like, you're welcome?
Yeah.
Well,
Just because you have menopause doesn't mean you're like useless. I mean,
Right?
yes, you're not useless because you freaking have menopause. Like fuck you. Like,
No, but in that sense, they were saying she couldn't reproduce.
yeah, but they kept on bringing it up, and I'm like, we get it. We get it.
Yeah, it did hit a few many times.
I was like, after like the third time, I'm like, we understand she's over 40. We get it.
One thing that I was kind of curious about was that they kept referring to like JBF's lineage as like being facially distinct. Like their heads were shaped a certain way. They mentioned it like 2 or 3 times. And I was like, is this some sort of weird reference to like Down syndrome or something? Because they had talked about her daughter having Down syndrome.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, why did, like, at least 2 different times they brought it up in that post society where I was like, why are we talking about this? Why is this so?
I missed that. Yeah.
That went over my head.
Yeah. The only thing I remember about people's heads in the post period was the one of the guys punched one of the Neanderthal people and like broke his hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Did you have more, Ryan?
Oh, I was going to say the other thing that was interesting that I thought was their whole epigenesis thing where they talked about the Moiras being able to like genetically evolve just randomly.
Yeah, I didn't.
That one seemed a little strange where they were like, where they called it going epi, and it was like, I didn't quite understand what that meant.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, it was like they became a new person within their own body, but it
Right,
didn't
because
quite-
like
Cal
yeah.
1, 2, and 3, or whatever. her
or she
name
was
is.
Cal 2, and it
Yeah.
stated in there that Cal 1 had died at 13, but it's still the same body. So I think it's just maybe something where they change enough that they consider themselves a different person.
Maybe like a
Mhm.
different spirit or something. I don't know.
I didn't understand how
There's
it
one,
worked. I just read that and thought of Doctor Who.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attempting to take on, or putting up with our rants in Voxer, whichever it may be. Let's see. Next month's book. What are we reading next month, Amber?
The City We Became
that's
by Andrew Jemison.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay. So if you'd like to join us for that, the sign-up sheet is in the description box down below, as well as the links to all of my co-hosts. Except for Charles, I'll update that when we get off here. And next week on Monday, I will be interviewing Harlequin Presents author Callie Anthony, all the way from Australia. So don't miss that. That's at 7:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific, and it's on the 28th at, I think, 9 in the morning Australia time. I'm just guessing. So, Eastern Australia time. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. This was 7 Eves by Neal Stephenson. Check it out if you like or not, but otherwise, have a good evening, and we will see you in another video.
Bye.
Bye.